Bringing in my panel, Sky News host, the National Affairs Editor too at the Daily Telegraph, James Morrow, and our Sky News Election Analyst, our Chief Psephologist, Tom Connell. Gents, welcome. I mentioned at the part, I played a grab there from Peter Dutton's interview with Andrew Connell. I picked up the China comments, but it was a broad-ranging interview. He had this to say on the possibility that he might even extend that cut to the fuel excise. Have a listen.
Well, it's 12 months to be reviewed at the end of that period.
So you might do it again?
Well, if we think that there is a longer period of recovery required from Labor's mess, then we'll look at any measure to try and provide relief to Australians.
Now, I'm not going to call it an excise. It's a tax. It's a fuel tax. He's halved it at this stage, Tom. He's leaving the door open. I reckon it's smart politics. What do you think?
Yeah, well, it's absolutely, I think, a good idea to leave the door open because if you think about it, it's similar to the energy rebate. There's no need to say it's going to be a hard and fast end. You say how long it's going to last. Originally, you say if the pain persists, we might do something. I don't sense it's necessarily something he'd want to extend. That language he used was clever in that he wasn't actually saying we're likely to, but just leaving it open. And in a similar way, Peter, I think one of the really interesting things about what the approach will be from the Liberal Party comes on tax, because before the budget from Labor, they were saying, we'll see if there's headroom, they were the words from Angus Taylor, to deliver another income tax cut. Now, the one thing they really were disappointed in Labor on was not removing the 37% tax bracket. So that's clearly what they'd like to do, to have more genuine income tax reform. But is it affordable right now is the problem. Now, Angus Taylor was asked this today at the National Press Club. It was just noteworthy. He didn't want to say no to it or yes to it. So it's something that I sense they'd still like to do and keep that hope alive, albeit it's probably going to be hard to do budget-wise in this next term. But I think that's an interesting watch. But yeah, keep the options open, and voters want to hear about hope, I suppose, on cost of living.
They do. They do. And there was an attempted wedge too, staying with the economic stuff here, James, an attempted wedge by Labor putting out their submission to the Fair Work Commission where they will support an above inflation increase to the minimum wage. Now, if you've got a small business, this will horrify you unless you're getting a lift in productivity. That's been underscored by the RBA boss yesterday. She says productivity has been stagnant for such a long time. This is really important, but I don't think the wedge worked for Labor.
Well, I don't think it works for anybody, not just small business owners, but anybody who genuinely cares about and understands the nature of the Australian economy and where we are right now, Peter. I mean, this proposal to give the lower-paid workers a wage rise plus inflation, and above that, this gets us into real sort of wage price spiral sort of territory. I think it's really irresponsible, and, it's so nakedly political. Oh, Peter Dutton, well, let's see, will Peter Dutton oppose a wage rise? And it's the same sort of thing that they did with Medicare. We're going to raise $8.5 billion. If he doesn't go along, he's cutting Medicare. And it's really cheap, and I think that it's very bad for the overall economy. And Peter, I think that it also creates this problem where we just keep driving inflation, we keep crowding out the private sector, and we keep having then, as a result, more and more inflation with less and less actual growth behind it. And this is where the whole sort of caring politics of Anthony Albanese really hits a wall.
And I might add, they can put a submission into the Fair Work Commission, but they're not the ones paying for any increase. That's left to business. And I think this is the climate where it's pretty tough for business. So we'll see how that plays out. Hey, I like to talk, Tom, about the macro, the national election campaign, but I also like to have a look into seats, particularly marginals, and I want to see the ground game, right? I love to get in my car and get around the suburbs and get a feel for what's happening. We saw today a really nimble response in the seat of Kooyong by the Liberals against Monique Ryan, and the sort of sign stealing that's been going on. They say it's happened a lot. We've certainly caught her husband once on camera. I've got one of the signs for me. I'll put it up there with my audience to give them a look. I mean, they're pretty hard to miss as you're driving around the suburbs. I think they're fantastic. But this has happened in a matter of, 24 hours. This is the stuff that turns the tide, gets the momentum your way. As I said, pretty nimble work. Give us your read on Kooyong.
Yeah, I think it was nimble. I was thinking about this earlier because you go, there's this video, Peter Jordan, Monique Ryan's husband. I will get it around on social what else do you do? Do you do a sign with his picture on it or something? This is quite a clever way of doing it because it gets people talking. If you haven't heard of what happened and you see the sign, then you start explaining it to someone. So I agree on the nimble element. Look, this seat's really interesting. My conversations all the way through is Goldstein a lot more likely to fall than Kooyong. But it's funny, these incidents, which might seem minor, Peter, that can sort of crystallise thoughts or set a narrative in play. I'm not saying that will necessarily happen here. I did have a Liberal MP in Victoria quip that this could be, for the sort of seat of Kooyong, this could be like the Mark Latham handshake, this moment where Peter Jordan was making off with this sign. So we'll see if this is the talking point where we're focusing back on in 5 weeks. One thing that's interesting about this campaign, or a couple of quick things I'll mention, is first of all, that I wouldn't underestimate Monique Ryan. She, her campaign team, the day after the redistributions were done, a Liberal contact told me they were in the new area of Kooyong. So one day after, Monique Ryan's team was door knocking them. That's how quick they were on the redistribution and the resources they have to go out and straight away be the first ones to introduce themselves. So clearly a very well-resourced campaign and clearly know what they're doing. The interesting element in terms of the primary vote here is Monique Ryan got 40% last time. Compare that to Goldstein, where Zoe Daniel got 34% of the primary. In other words, Monique Ryan's primary has to go down for her to lose. It's not just, doesn't have her fate in the hands of preferences. So Zoe Daniel could keep up that primary and still lose. Monique Ryan, her fate's more in her own hands. So that's why I think this campaign will be very much about Monique Ryan from a Liberal point of view. If they bring down her primary, then it becomes winnable, because 40% was one of the higher marks for the Teal independents, if you like, and it just makes it a little bit of a different contest.
Yeah, look, I agree with your point about our foot soldiers. I've heard the same thing up until the last couple of months, but I think when you look at aggregate terms, you've got the husband, you've got her ticking off young kids, you've got that please call me doctor rubbish. I think she's coming across as a real campaign Karen. And if you're the campaign Karen in a place like Kooyong, there's an alliteration for you, I think that stuff starts to really stick, and it becomes a joke. And when they're laughing at you, not with you, but at you in a campaign, I think that's when you're going to start to struggle. So campaign Karen, I tell you what, keep it up. Hey, James, just before we go, Financial Review today, it is reported that the climate czar, Matt Kean, interesting, has a whole lot of material, financial, personal interests in a whole lot of agricultural projects that generate carbon credits. Now, I don't think you just get rid of this conflict of interest by declaring it. I think it comes down to getting rid of these investments or standing down from the job as the supposed independent umpire of climate policy in this country.
Well, yeah, look, he says, that, I declared them, and everybody says, it's strictly within the bounds of the rules and everything like that. But it would be very useful, you would have to imagine, for this company that he has these material interests in, which are doing 3 different projects, to have somebody like Matt Kean on their books, who is, of course, the climate czar. I just think that this is a really bad look, and I think it also calls into mind, Peter, the way, in general, we find that so much of, this sort of big-hearted climate policy here is driven by people with a great deal of material self-interest in it. I think it absolutely reeks. I think that, it's fine that he's disclosed it. It's fine that he says that there's no conflict, but my word, it just doesn't look good to anybody looking at this from the outside at a climate regime that a lot of people are making a lot of money off of while the rest of us pay the bills.
I think this is going to be the battle lines. It's going to come out more and more in coming years and months. Jens, thank you.